What are some of the most common traps that appear in the games of beginner players? See, traps are a tricky thing because truth is that a lot of traps depend on whether the player who is basically allowing them is going to fall. So it's like really it depends on the opponent. However, there are a few things you would like to know about traps that can help it make it easier. And I'm going to try to bring a few insights with that. So let's talk about some of the traps that I got caught in when I was younger and the things that I really hate. Usually these happen for blacks. We can actually take a look at those from the black perspective. So in most times people would do e4 against me. And when they do, I would play c5. And I would be try to be modern, try to go with something that's immediate. Then they would usually play knight to c3, knight c6, and f4. And this is one of the things that I hated. And it's not so much that I hated it because it's a bad line or it's too dangerous. It's just that I really didn't know what I was supposed to do. Like, how was I supposed to plan ahead here and make my development count? So it was a tricky thing. I further on realized that there is a setup for this, but I'm going to show it to you. Yet, I want to tell you about how you can avoid getting in a structurally challenging position from the very beginning. First idea is that you must outline. Getting in a challenging position in terms of structure could be really easy. You just play carelessly, or you think that everything is fine, and then suddenly you find yourself in a bad position with very little moves and opportunities. So that's why I'm actually saying that it's kind of challenging. However, the important thing that you need to know is that oftentimes you don't really have to worry if you outline a couple of different versions for developing your pieces. Like if we think about playing d6, knight f6, e6, and bishop e7 plus castling, we could very easily say this is okay. But also, we could actually say, what else is there? Well, I can think about the opportunity, instead of doing this, to actually try g6, bishop g7, e6, and knight e7. And now you could kind of see the important difference that this setup actually makes. It's very interesting. We could have that idea of playing the move of g6 plus bishop to the g7, but we could also have the idea of playing e6 and knight f6. And then the concept is that you want to be able to compare these. Okay, so compare them to one another. Comparing them to one another is really the key, because that gives you the ultimate, a knowledge as to whether the structure in general has a good, vibe to it, or perhaps does not. So, like, the whole thinking about this is that with e6 and bishop e7, our bishop is going to stand out pretty passively. With g6 and bishop to the g7, the bishop is going to stay protecting a king and looking down to the white queen side. It's a very big idea when you get to think about it like that. Very interesting. So, in a lot of times, you would have to be wondering about that type of thing. So, just like, what's the difference? But then you could choose the one that actually is better. Now, there comes another question to that. How do we really know whether this one's better or the other one is more important? This is a complicated question, a very complicated question. The reason behind it is that if we just go for a move or think about a move like e6 bishop g6 bishop g7 simply from the static view, like does it look good or does it not look good, you're going to get a very limited scope of what's really going to happen. Point is, you want to focus on two things. First, whether this type of development that you're going to actually make is going to have any impact in terms of pressuring the opponent and challenging him, or Actually, there's a second idea, which always happens to be thinking about whether the opponent can actually threaten against you, whether he can attack you in any way, in this or that way, or he can do anything like this. Because then knowing that type of idea, this will help you to decide. Right now, I think that with this setup, we could very easily see that there's going to be no immediate attack or pressure that white will create after g6. And yet if we play e6, there is ultimately the opportunity for white to think of a move like f5, maybe concentrate his attention on getting more forces instantly towards king's side. So that could be a pretty good case scenario where he will stand really strong and really well as opposed to our position. Very important to think about it this way, regarding the development. So if we have that kind of idea, and especially you outline, that means you think in perspective, like what is going to happen in the next moves, you're going to get a pretty clear idea where to make it. So for instance, knight f3, g6. Let's say bishop b5, and then of course, after continuing with this move, in case white plays a move of bishop b5, bishop d7, castles, bishop g7. You remember that you do not want to play what I often call move by move strategy. A move by move strategy more or less means I go this way and then we'll figure out what happens next. This is a bad idea to play. Okay, so you'd always like to have at least a couple moves in line so that you could decide between these couple moves and choose as to which one is the more appropriate. This kind of development really seems to fit. Now let's talk about some other, traps. For example, there was a trap that I used and people used against me. Mostly I used when I was playing with white versus the Sicilians. And this is when the normal open Sicilian would happen like this. Oftentimes people would do f3, and so there it is. A quick dilemma, which is, I'd say, very important at the same time. What does black do from here? Does he choose to open? Does he choose to attack? Does he choose to, gradually improve his pieces? What do we do? Good, really good question. It's not easy, honestly. But what do we really do? So this is a really important question. When you're thinking about such a position, I always say, focus your attention on what the opponent wants to do first. Okay, so what does he want to do right now? Pretty clear that what he would like to do in this type of position is one thing, and it is the chance for him to attack. Like, so he could play with his c4, very powerful restrictive move, and then you could really limit our own position and our own pieces in a big way. So we'd like to be extremely careful not to allow something like this to happen. Okay, so this is a good point. Now, thinking about the opponent's way to attack or restrict you is very essential because it will show you quite clearly where or what you've got to be worried about. And indeed, we don't want to just let that happen. So in that specific case, of course, black can play the very active e5. Now, I have to tell you, this may always happen against you, no matter what you're thinking, because people tend to miss things or not know things every time. It's just like this happens to both grandmasters and really strong players. And the simple reason for this is because we cannot know everything. But again, if your opponent is using a likely offbeat variation or one that simply tries to attack a very good opening or a very solid development, you got to know that's not right. So there's not too much that you've got to be worried about. For instance, after the move of e5, of course, white may try to go knight b3. Now remember the idea of being provoked. People will try to provoke you. And they will try to do that by allowing you to make moves like d5 and making sure and thinking that you could exploit their position or attack them. Don't do that. The reason why I don't want you to do that is because if you do that, you will fall. And what I mean is you will go too early and things are just not going to work out that well. You could see that after the move of pawn onto the d5, white can try bishop to the g5, attacking the knight. He is going to have a pretty strong pressure coming against the knight on the f6. It's really uncomfortable, but there's not much that we can do. It's just this is what's going to happen. This is why it's so necessary. Remember that. Don't get provoked. You can play one move like e5. e5 is a typical move usually, but we cannot continue with this. So we have to make sure that there is another variation. There is another line that we could play so it could work. So for instance, right now, then surely the idea is black can play bishop to the e6. He could stabilize a good a good position towards the e5. So there's not too much to worry, and like later on we are ready to continue. So it's just we can think about bishop to the e7, can think about knight to the c6, and there's more. So this is a really interesting variation. Okay, now is that everything? Of course not, but it's a good idea. So you could stay stable. You could still try to punch the opponent or counter punch him, especially with the support in the middle. And then, for instance, if he plays with c4 now, I believe black has already gotten a great space to take command of. Knight c3, short castles, bishop e2, and maybe even something like rook c8 to create a good challenge, a good type of attack against the opponent's position out there on c4. Very interesting way of playing it, I have to say, I have to admit. See, this is a good line of thinking. In many occasions, you will be pushed to a position that you don't know. Simply follow the principles and try to play more actively. If you do that, I guarantee you, you will stay out of trouble. That's all you would like to keep in mind. Let's take a look and see other type of possibilities your opponent can use against you. Sometimes, when I was actually playing with black, people would do an interesting setup. They would do knight f3. Okay, I would usually play e6. They would do g3. And after d5, they'd play e5, knight c6, and bishop g2. That would be interesting for me because I would simply say, okay, I'm going to develop normally with, something like whatever, knight e7. And then I would quickly find myself into trouble in this position, not knowing what to do or how to set up the rest of my development. Now, what I need you to do, very importantly, is to look careful as to what the opponent's intending to do. Like what sort of setup he wants to do, where does he want to, generally set a piece, put the pieces so that he could, challenge us, whatever. Now, that you can't stop, but you can prepare towards it. The concept being here is that given that white has advanced a pawn, his setup is going to work pretty concretely towards that actual pawn. So he would like to put his queen on the line on e2, perhaps play with d3, and come across with quite a few pieces right down there. Now that's fine. Don't you worry about that. It's possible that he does it, and he will likely be okay by doing so. But what I recommend you to do is don't to panic. Again, what will help most about these kinds of positions is the concept of outlining. You simply want to figure out where your pieces are going to go and how would they look, so that you could, make them possibly go at the best or from the best positions possible. One way to do this very effectively here is think about g6 plus bishop g7. That will give you an instant opportunity to consider castling. So we can have our king secured on a very good position. And step by step, we can follow up more. You could do queen to the c7. We could have a chance to go ahead with a move like, say, short castles, f6 maybe even played out, which is going to be a great idea. See, outlining against whatever your opponent's major strength is turns out always to be very successful. So I recommend it to you whenever you get the chance to do it. Think about it that way. organizing the pieces, getting them close. This is good. Very important. So, talking about other things, let's discuss how people can try to confuse you by playing d4. Now, d4 is the soft approach. See, when you see a move like that, you're just saying, "Oh, that's fine. He's taking it easy on me. I'm not going to be worried anymore." Don't do that mistake. The d4 type of variations are possibly the most insidious lines because it makes you relax, it makes you feel like everything's okay, and then suddenly they get you with a dangerous setup. So the first thing that I recommend you to do is whenever you play against a move like d4, whatever you've chosen, knight f6 or d5, be careful. Let's go now with the d5 lines because, I mean, even against knight to the f6, it could still go the same way. Now, one of the most hidden dangerous lines in this is the so-called collie attack. The collie attack works when white plays knight f3, knight f6, bishop f... So actually, bishop f3 is a London system. We're going to talk about that shortly. But it's e3. And it makes you feel like, okay, white's really not fighting for a big advantage. Now, that's a trick. He is going for something much more. He just doesn't want you to see it. The point behind this strategy by white is that after you develop the bishop or do anything, white's ready to castle, and then after castling, play knight d2. If you do b6 or even c5, c3, knight c6, and then they play e4. Point is he wants to open up as quickly as he can, just challenge you in one way or another, and do it well. That is a fairly interesting way of playing this variation. You have to know that. Now, by no means this suggests that you're in a bad game. It's not at all that. But you need to be prepared. First of all, let's think a little bit about how well set up white is. Truth be told, I don't think he's so well set. And I think that he has got, some pieces, yes, but it's not that perfect. And secondly, every new line, or every line in chess in particular, but especially every new line, has a type of vulnerability, a weakness that one allows deep down. And you want to sort of see that. You want to find it. The problem of white in this position is that he actually has no preparation. That doesn't mean that it's necessarily horrible, but without preparation, there's lots of ideas that could be born. And one of them is the fact that black doesn't have to wait. He doesn't have to exchange or do all these sequences. His idea could simply be to exchange in d4 and play e5. A wonderful resource to counter white. In the end of the day, if his pieces are mostly backward and not that well prepared, a chance for us to break through and open him up faster is going to be a great idea. If you look at it after the e5 move, d takes to the e5, knight takes to e5, knight takes to the e5, and bishop takes to the e5, things start to look really, really well. The bishop is great. Most of white's own pieces wouldn't have the ability to do too much after that bishop is posted there. And it's a great thinking. Think about that. A lot of the ideas, are about finding different, like chance to open. Good job, because then as soon as that's done, of course, white's got a problem. Well, it's an interesting concept. The principle is always this: open, 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 open. It's like if you're ahead in development, that's the thing that you would want to do, especially if it works so well. It's great. Let's take a look at another type of trap. Another kind of trap is when they try to dominate the center, playing with bishop f4. Now, something really important that you've got to ask yourself in such a position is always, what does my opponent really want to do? What is he really looking to do? Is he looking for like some type of attack? Is he actually looking for something different? I guess it depends, really. But, first and foremost, right now, we clearly see that everything he wants is to put a piece on the e5 square and make sure that this is going to kill us, or at least hold us back. So how do you respond against something like that? There are different ways, for sure, but I say fight. Fight over the square. Fight over the idea of attacking that he's got. Right now, behind the knight e5 move, he's put in 3 pieces to support this square. You cannot let it be. You cannot let it be. So we can have e6 being played. White can, of course, do a move like e3. Then we can have bishop to the d6 being played in this position very strongly. And then you understand that now with that e5 square taken under our control, if white plays with bishop to the d3, we could exchange, creating quite a severe weakness, in his position. So it's not an easy thing. The other thing is that if he doesn't, we're really able to put in a quite strong battle over that square. Here's a good example of that. For instance, if white plays with a move of knight to the e5, usually one of the common moves, black could just play short castles, knight bd2, c5, c3, knight c6, and then in case of anything like that, black could even come forward with queen c7, attacking the knight. Surely white can try to defend it with a move like f4, but it really doesn't make much of a difference, because the reality is that even after the move of pawn up to the f4, he is going to still leave specific weaknesses inside of his position. So for example, let's take a look. After that move of f4, we could do a move like maybe even knight to d7, and then we're going to be able to play with f6. In no time, that move is actually going to be perfect. We could have that f6, drive the knight out of the way, and then actually after that, maybe we could focus on the idea of playing more. It's a beautiful, beautiful activity. A lot of times, it is going to be a fight over a square. I know it sounds like, okay, well, there are much bigger things to fight for than a square. Not in the opening, though. Opening is about developing the pieces and not caring about positional play. Yet, if your opponent makes a successful pressure or a control successfully the center, then you're going to have a very bad opening and potentially even a very bad, middle game. So you really got to give your best to fight over that and do not allow him to make any complications. This is a great idea. Knight d7 helps out with that a lot, because we get to prepare ourselves the f6 move, or maybe even f5 in case there is any danger or something that could happen on that side of the board. So you see, we're now talking again, we're going into the area of the more positional traps, really. It's not a tactical trap he's setting up. It's more of a positional trap. And once we, of course, avoid this, things are much easier. No complications can happen. I think it's much easier. And so, yeah, think about that. A lot of the ideas into simply, knight d7, an idea of f6 that could come in too quickly, and we could make it work. Good example. I have to admit, it was a good example to realize, so it's all there. Let's get back to an earlier stage and see. Very interesting. Positional traps. What about when you're white? Could black set up positional traps again, or tactical traps against you? Of course, anybody can. But I don't think that it is too troublesome. How is that? Well, for example, if we discuss, let's say we're playing e4, well, black is the one who is usually defending himself. See, so he's going to be the one to be a little bit more worried. Possibly, not necessarily, but possibly, he could continue with, say, d5. Now, the Scandinavian is a tricky line for a number of reasons, but it could be very tricky. Point behind it is to allow white the chance to take control of the center, but then get the counter. So that's a good idea. Like, if white plays edicts to the d5 right now, then black is going to get ready for the move of knight f6. d4, knight takes d5. Now, the good news is that this line does not pose any immediate danger, so I wouldn't really, I don't think that it's something you've got to be necessarily worried about. You can play knight f3, bishop to the e2, and so on. However, there is a possibility that he could do a move like queen takes to the d5, a slightly different type of variation. And it's like if he plays with that move, you can consider playing knight c3, queen to a5, pawn to the d4, knight f6, knight f3, c6, and then bishop to the c4. So you can have that a really good looking bishop instantly and directly lined up against f7. You can have e5, and then like knight to the e5. That can be also quite actively done. So it's really a very easy way of setting out to improve and really like bring over your pieces close. Now, people will try to trick you. One of the cheapest traps is knight c6, and then the idea behind it is to play bishop g4 and short castles. In fact, sometimes people play it pretty quickly, directly, like so bishop g4. What I'm here to tell you is that all you got to do is continue developing, and when people play in this way, beware. Usually, the only way on how he could take advantage of the position is when he attacks the center. This is why, let's say if we play bishop e2, knight c6. The moment you see something like that, you have to be aware. The trick is that he needs a target. His target is the center. This is why the major move that most chess players do not know about actually turns out to be g4. And I have to say, by the way, that it is a very, very powerful move. After we do this kind of move, we could understand the danger that black would have to experience. What is it? Well, he's going to be pushed back. So instead of actually attacking us, he would have to worry about us attacking him. Bishop g6. And this is a good time for us to play the move of knight e5. See, if you make sure that you restrict the opponent from the very beginning, from the very early stage, like this is done, you are one step closer to becoming very successful with the different tactics you've got. That's exactly what we're doing here. Very interesting, very powerful, if you ask me, too. Then, after knight e5, of course, black could play e6, but then we are the one who's pressuring. Now, the great idea is that even if you exchange the bishop on the g6 in this position, there is going to be nothing bad. The whole king side looks very well protected, and the other idea is that despite everything, it doesn't seem like it's going to be likely for him to do anything. No pressure, no complication. You just play knight takes g6, and you know what's great about the bishop pair is that there will be no more any opportunity for him to ever open the position. If he does do that, then the bishops are going to open and they're going to destroy him. That's why we could say that the idea of knight e5 is great here. But again, as you can see, this is like more of a vague trap. Now, what other traps exist? Basically sometimes black makes the positional trap of playing knight f6, hoping to provoke us to advance that pawn, and later on he'd like to get a chance to challenge it. It's okay though, don't be worried. This kind of trap is very quick, and as long as you follow the idea to take control of the center and further get to support it, you'll be good. So let's advance, not too much though. We just continue with the move of a pawn up to the d4 as we go. And when black plays d6, we can have knight f3 played out very quickly. It's a very good thinking, very easy thinking. Now we got the support, and we are ready to roll. If he exchanges on e5, we've got knight takes to the e5 played out quite quickly. And, if he doesn't, well, what else can he do? For example, bishop g4. And then, of course, we've got the idea of playing bishop e2. There's no tactic going on out there. There's no complication of any kind. We just make sure that everything is safe. In case of an exchange, of course, we've got the retake, so this is not going to be even a major complication of a kind. We know everything's under control in the best way possible. So it's a pretty interesting lineup. Again, we're talking about, really an idea. Setting yourself in a trap means you get a weakness. And when, of course, if you create yourself a weakness, then you will be in trouble because of that. That kind of weakness is going to be something your opponent would like to exploit, whatever. But in this case, in this very specific case, there is no weakness. We just cover the f3. e5 is fairly advanced, yes, but it's not that much stretched out there. It's actually at a very good position. And then, of course, we've got much more to follow it. We've got short castles and so on. So this actually looks pretty good. So remember, traps exist because we allow weaknesses or because we get lured into tactical things that aren't so clear, and yet, just they look tempting. As long as you keep your eyes on the major development you can do, on the simple idea of where the pieces need to be, that's going to help a lot. So very, very much so. It's like actually after that move and the idea, we're perfect. That's Black's main goal. It works out great, and it's certainly very good. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say in terms of the whole thinking here, just how to think or how to analyze it more precisely. Remember though, oftentimes it's really about that, developing your pieces and bringing them closer to the center, making sure everything goes fast. The idea is this: always fast. So if you're fast in that, you can make it very successful. If you're not that fast, if you're not quick enough, well, problems are definitely going to happen. So you see, speed matters always. So this is like my take on the common ways on how people can get trapped in the opening. It's never a very easy topic because, you can get entrapped in different ways, but I hope that some of my advice today was useful for you so you know how the opponent can lure you into getting a bad structure or a bad position right from the start.